Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Have you been following the election closely or not closely?
I don't need election.
Yeah, there's one. Is it next week?
Well,
I guess it's happening now in a lot of places, right?
It is happening all over, of course.
Voted.
And it's just over a week from now. I was a political science major in college. I worked for a congressman for a summer before my senior year of college. I'm kind of into politics, and unfortunately, I'm into politics. And so, I will say this: after spending 3 months in D.C., this was back in the '90s when it was the summer. I was an intern the summer that Monica Lewinsky scandal was going around, and so being an intern when that was the intern story of the century.
Yeah.
That was a little awkward.
Wow.
But so
where were you interning?
I for a Republican congressman in Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But you were in D.C.
But I was at the D.C. office.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So where do you see the country going if Trump gets it, and where do you see us heading if Biden gets it?
Well, so, I mean, there are so many things, there are so many thoughts on this. I did not vote for Trump in the last election. I did not vote for Clinton. I went third party.
Mm-hmm.
So I voted third party because I couldn't bring myself to vote for either of the major party candidates last time around for a variety of reasons. But ultimately, it came down to I don't trust that either one of these people is going to, frankly, be awesome for our country and for, I guess, what would be my vision of the country. And so that was the first since I've been old enough to vote for presidents. That's the first time that I had not voted for the Republican candidate. And so I'd always voted for a Republican prior to that, until that election. And I am likely going to do the same thing next week. I cannot bring myself, and here's the deal. We live in Tennessee. We know what color Tennessee is going to be on election night. So I was talking to a friend over the weekend, and we said we both feel like we can have these philosophical debates about what you want to do with the presidential election, but we live in a very staunchly red state.
Sure.
So our vote is not going to push it,
Yep.
one way or the other. I think we would have more to wrestle with.
Yep.
Just in general,
like
if it
Ohio
were
or
Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan,
Yep.
Even North Carolina seems to be potentially up for grabs.
Yep.
So so there's a lot to consider there, and so I think the next 4 years with Trump in the White House, I don't trust his decision making. If I just think about this, if he were a business leader, he would prove himself to me to not be somebody who I could trust, because he's going to say one thing and do another. He doesn't surround himself with people who he seems to listen to and take their counsel. And even if he says it one day, it doesn't mean he's going to do it the next. I find that terribly troubling,
right,
particularly from the President of the United States.
Yep.
I think he regularly stoops below his position. Twitter has not helped him, but I think he has such an ego that he has to have the attention all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Twitter lets him do that. And so I think that's where he is. I've got a slew of concerns about him. Now he has done some things that I've been frankly pleasantly surprised with, even in regard to some peace deals, like some of what he's been able to do with some recent peace deals in the Middle East. Even in just recent weeks, I thought, okay, well that's some really positive stuff. Frankly, I kind of was surprised that he was able to pull some of that off. So I want to give credit where credit is due, but on the whole, I struggle significantly with him. Obviously, I did 4 years ago. I, like many people, I didn't take him seriously as a legitimate candidate.
Yep.
I frankly still don't take him seriously as a legitimate candidate, and I think time will tell that he has probably ruined the Republican Party from what it used to be, and it's been recrafted into something entirely different.
Okay, interesting. So let's assume that he loses this election, and so then you're coming back in 2024, and the Republican Party is trying to take over or trying to put their guy or gal in as president at that point. When you say ruin the Republican Party, what are you thinking the Republican Party needs to work through, or what does it look like at the next election cycle?
Yeah, so my hope is that the Republican Party stands for the free market.
Mm-hmm.
My hope is that it stands for life and justice. And so, I mean, even going back to Nixon would talk about law and order. Trump's been talking about law and order a lot. So given the summer that we had in the United States, there was a lot of talk about law and order.
Mm-hmm.
And those are often those, they're called the dog whistles, to try to get people who have a lot of racist thoughts or history or tendency, or who just flat out are racist to kind of fire up that base.
Yep.
Law and order should just mean justice for all.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it doesn't. That's a problem to me. So why is law and order and why are law and order and justice not the same thing?
Yeah. Okay.
That doesn't seem. I don't like that history of the Republicans, and so the Republicans have some troubling history themselves. I mean, even going back to the Reagan days.
Yep.
So when it comes to race relations and just the way race is viewed in the United States, in crime, I mean, there's a lot of work to do. So my hope for the Republican Party is that Trump has pushed it so far that it has caused those who would still consider themselves conservative but not Trump-based conservatives to maybe say, what do we really need to be doing? What do we need to do to sort of reconcile back to something that is a more thoughtful? I mean, wasn't it George W. Bush talked about the compassionate conservative? Well, that always sort of rang a little false at the time, but man, that would be really nice to have moving forward. And frankly, it would be such a stark contrast to what we have today, that compassionate should mean just law, just order. It should mean that there's life and liberty while pursuing happiness for everybody. And frankly, that doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what religion you are, because we're trying to all live in this country together. And so the idea of the United States was to be a place where we can all function and live together. And both parties have largely walked away from that. Both parties are well served to incite disunity.
Yes.
And so I'm waiting for somebody to come back and say, let's bring this thing together. So some of what Biden is trying to do right now is hitting on those notes. But he's doing so as a Democrat in a party that has just as much as Republicans has often sought to divide people as well. So the two major parties have loads of baggage, and it's going to take somebody to either rise up and really try to revamp and overhaul those parties, or I think never has there been a better chance for a third party organization or a third party just to rise up.
Yeah. So the Biden thing is a good example, because I agree. My perception is, now I will say that I share basically all of your thoughts with Trump. I will say in his defense, which you probably agree with too, that he hasn't always been given a fair shake from the media, and they have positioned him in a certain way as well. I'm not saying it's all incorrect, but I share your thoughts on Trump.
I would dare say every president would say they don't get a fair shake from the media.
Yeah, it's probably true. Well, yeah.
I've heard the argument that he's been scrutinized more than past presidents. I mean, I'd say, okay, I don't know how to quantify that.
Yeah, I think it depends which news outlet.
Maybe not. I don't truly know.
Well, I think it depends which news outlet. So that's actually a great point, because if someone's just watching Fox, then Trump's the savior. But if they're watching CNN, MSNBC, NBC, those other things, and then they do position him in a somewhat negative light, as it seems to be whenever they have a chance. My perception, though, back to the race thing, quite frankly, my perception is that Biden would be better than Trump in terms of better race relations. Now, I could be wrong. That's my perception. And that does seem to be a more a better strength of the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
But why does it then like have to come at the expense of free market? You know what I mean? Like, why can't we have both of these things? Why do they need to be at odds with each other? So back to your comment on hope that Gore desire would be to see some of these better race relations brought into a more compassionate conservative group. I sort of feel like there's an undercurrent in that direction on the Republican side. Do you feel the same?
Absolutely.
And so maybe
in my circles, I hear it all the time.
Okay, yeah. So maybe in 4 years, is it too idealistic to think that we can get the best of both worlds a little bit, if you will, where we have a good, strong leader who understands the value of free market, but also the value of justice for all? I mean, is that too much to ask for? Or do you think we're heading in that direction? The Republican Party's heading in that direction already?
I think if Trump wins the election, that perhaps momentum that you're sensing will grow dramatically. That's this undercurrent of conservatives, because it will continue. Something will have to grow in contrast to him. If he loses, then everything is up for grabs in the Republican Party at that point. And I think it would be an opportunity for just a more centrist person to come in, but could still have some. They're going to probably try to borrow some things that Trump, was able to play well to win over the Republican Party. Mm-hmm. And so I think that change that more dramatic change that you're sort of referencing there is probably most likely to happen if Trump actually wins the election.
So, but don't you think if Trump wins the election, the Republican Party says, well, look, see, he was a divisive guy, but he got it done for us, so let's get more of that?
Yes, and because that will happen, I think that's why there will be this stronger conservative backlash under the current.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, do you think there's any path? I mean, there's always a path, but based on what I'm reading and hearing, it looks likely that Biden's in. Right, I mean, he's further ahead, way further ahead than
it does, except
Hillary
for the fact that everybody thought Hillary was in.
Yeah, I mean and
it was quite a shock, that night to most of the country, frankly.
Most certainly, but Biden's lead is way more than Trump. But I guess it depends where you get.
I haven't done a comparison on what we're today recording this. We're 8 days away from the election, I think. I don't know what the polls were saying 4 years ago, 8 days out.
Yeah, I think
everything had Hillary in the lead, as I recall, because it seemed like most folks were expecting that it was kind of a done deal.
Yeah.
And it clearly wasn't, and that was a crazy, crazy night.
Yep.
And so a lot of Democrat parties got ruined, that night. Not the party itself, although some would argue that it did too, but like the actual, events. And so I don't know. I mean, that's where I don't know what to believe. I say that probably every other day when I'm talking to somebody. It's like, I don't know what to believe.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if we're talking about COVID. It doesn't matter if we're talking about the election. It doesn't matter. Like because we've got algorithms, sending things our way. We've got, clearly there are, the State Department came out last week saying that Russia and Iran and other countries are trying to interfere in the election.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's just a lot of I don't know what to believe.
I agree.
So I want to underreact and try to thoughtfully take in what I'm hearing. Go, all right, does that seem consistent? So I'm usually looking for consistency of data points and say, okay, that seems to line up with that, and that lines up with that. Therefore, it's probably true or more likely to be true. Versus, well, that seems like the crazy uncle that just ran off over that way, and there seems to be no correlation to that.
This is, don't entirely quote me on this, but I think 2016, about this time, Hillary had a 4-point lead, and right now Biden's like 9. That's rough.
Okay.
So, but again, I'm with you. I don't know exactly what to believe, and it wouldn't shock me at all if Trump gets in, because it seems like there's an advantage there to Biden to sort of position him as like the shoo-in. He's going to win. I don't know how that affects voters or whatnot, but and if more of the media does tend to go left, and that's what we're hearing, it looks likely that Biden's going to get in. You know, I don't know, but anything could happen, I suppose. But at the
end of the day,
times to be alive.
Well,
man.
at the end of the day, I think all of us have not only a choice for president, but we have the choice of choosing whether we're going to be afraid or not.
I agree.
Both parties win if you are afraid of the other side. Nothing motivates people like fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Republicans get more people to vote for Trump if they can make people afraid of Biden.
Yep.
Biden wins if he makes more people afraid of Trump.
Yes.
I mean, that's politics 101,
yes.
right? That's part of what happens. And so you just know it, but it does seem heightened, this year. I think maybe it's because of the personalities involved. Maybe it's because of the means at which we can get more access to more media. There's just a lot more stuff kind of coming at us. And so we have to stop. We can push the pause button on almost all of this communication and information coming at us. And then we can decide if we're going to be afraid by this or not.
Yeah, agreed.